Hi, welcome to another episode of the Keeping Up with Keith interview series. Today we have a great guest. He is a CEO, meteorologist, and the Chief Fun Officer at Drizzle Weather. Today we are keeping up with Jason Frazer. Hello, Jason.
Hey, Kevin, or I should say Keith. I'm so sorry. Good to see you. I don't know why I just called you Kevin. I'm like Keith. We've worked together for several years now.
I know
I
it's my
can't believe
brother's
I got
name, so no
moving forward.
worries. So, how are you doing, Jason?
I'm good. Look, I tell people all the time, you, I'm living the dream, and people always laugh whenever I say that, but I'm truly living my dream. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I kind of dabbled in it while I was working as both a reporter as well as a meteorologist, and now I get to basically design my own schedule and do what I want, on a daily basis. When I tell people, being an entrepreneur, yeah, it's great. If you want to take off 10 days straight, you can. But if you're not working, you ain't making money. So every day really is a hustle, to quote the great rapper Rick Ross. Every day I'm hustling.
That's great. So, what is Drizzle Weather for our audience?
Sure. Drizzle Weather is a STEM education entertainment company. And basically, we're on a mission to help kids understand that science can be fun, delicious, and entertaining. So, we have two products that are our primary focus. One is something called Edible Weather, which is where we teach kids about weather and climate using food. The second one is something called the STEM Experience, which is where we partner with schools, after school programs, as well as even other nonprofits. And what we will do is we will bring the Science Museum to either that group, that community center, etc., and let the kids take advantage of different weather stations. We do have several books. One of them is called Edible Weather. Matter of fact, it was just published on Amazon as well as Barnes and Noble. We put together 25 edible experiments. We also have a science textbook as well as a coloring book. So everything that we do, we are on a mission to help inspire the next generation of climatologists, environmentalists, and meteorologists.
Wow, that's a great. Love that. And so, edible weather. So, how do you make weather edible?
Sure. Look, it's one of those things where I know, people hear it and they're like, wait, you can eat your weather. When you think about no matter where you come from, no matter whether it's, Omaha, it's California, New York, right? The one thing that brings us all together is usually two things: music and food. And so as I was coming up with this idea, one of the things I really thought about was, how can we incorporate food? How can we incorporate snacks with kids? And so I thought, is there a way where maybe we could do a cookbook around weather and use this as some experiments? And so I sat and I designed some of these things. I will admit I did have a little bit of help from ChatGPT as well, because I wanted to make sure that the idea would be profitable. And one of our products is something called the Cloud Parfait Experiment. So here's what it looks like right here. And this is where we talk about what happens in the troposphere, the tropopause. And we use graham crackers, whipped cream, sprinkles, marshmallows, more whipped cream, and blue icing or blue food dye in order to help illustrate this point with kids. So obviously where we are at, here on the ground, right? You have the graham crackers, which looks just like sand. And then, usually somewhere between about 1,000, even 2,000 feet, we start to get more cloud development. Even though, yes, we can get clouds on the ground. I will admit that. But for the most part, we start to see cloud development somewhere around 1 to 2,000 feet. So that's why our next layer is whipped cream. And then we talk about why the clouds change color, right? Depending on the time of day and whatnot. That's why we use sprinkles. Then we talk about the precipitation, hence why we use marshmallows. We use more whipped cream. And then what inevitably happens, you get up to a certain level and it ends up becoming blue, or it appears blue. So we talk about why it appears blue.
Wow, that's very clever. Wow. Okay. No, actually that parfait looks kind of tasty to be honest too. So good.
Never had a child. I've been doing this for a year now. I've never had a child, Keith, tell me this was a terrible dessert. If anything,
Okay,
they've
okay.
been, "Oh, it's just so sweet." We love it. And I'm like, yes, I'm glad that you love it. But did you learn something? That's my big thing. I want to make sure that you learn something. So at the end of each lesson that I will do, I'll run through 3 to 4 different things that I've taught, and usually the kids will remember it. But I'll also usually say, like, okay, for some extra marshmallows, who can tell me how big is the troposphere? And you'll start getting like, and I often feel bad for the parents because I leave after I give them a sugar high.
Yes, yes. Okay, that's great. And one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to get you, I wanted to talk to you today because you're the master of the pivot. I mean, if you guys Google Jason, he has a long career in journalism and meteorology. He started as a veteran reporter working in top markets. I know you worked in Hartford. I mean, I think you were gone before I got to Hartford. I think you were in Boston at the time when I was in Hartford. And then you transitioned and started all over and get your meteorology degree and become a meteorologist and started in Savannah, then moved your way back up through the top markets into network. So how did you do all that? And I guess that span of time.
A lot of patience, a lot of self-reflection. When I graduated college, I graduated with a political science degree. I always like to say I got a BS in BS. No, I'm joking. Let me not say that. But one thing about political science is it really teaches you how to develop arguments. It really teaches you how to develop your public speaking skills, how to argue. At all of the different phases in my career, developing some sort of way to communicate with people has been the most important thing. So when I left college, I went into banking for 3.5 years. So I was a branch manager. I worked a lot with people in the community, getting them to understand financial services, retail banking. And I just knew that it wasn't really for me. And I always had a passion for working with people, for telling stories and the weather. And so, yeah, I mean, to your point, I spent about 9 years crisscrossing the country, just trying to understand not only reporting, but also getting to know these different communities. And when I got to Boston as an investigative reporter, I had a kumbaya moment with myself because I'll admit I wasn't really happy. And I kept thinking to myself, is this what I really want to do with the rest of my career? I don't. And I really enjoy weather. So let's just go back to school. If we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? And I think, Keith, it really
Mhm.
speaks to a larger life lesson that I've always had, which is we all have dreams. And it is up to us to say, now's the time to make it happen. Because if you don't make it happen now, when? When? There's always going to be an excuse for why you can't do it. Oh, I don't have the money. Oh, I don't have this. Oh, I need to lose 20 pounds. No, just do it. Just if we all took 2 steps to make our dream a reality, think about how powerful that would be in 6 months or a year or even 2 years from now. And so when I went to weather, I loved my time. I worked my way up from Savannah, Georgia, all the way to a national platform over at Fox Weather. A lot of people don't even know this, but I was even doing radio in Canada from the United States, Toronto.
Wow.
So technically, I have international experience. I've done that for 6 years. But when my contract came up at Fox, I really had to think about what is it that I really want to do next. And I love going into schools. I love interacting with kids. When I had spoken to a number of teachers, really over the years, but more within, 4 months prior to my contract expiring with Fox, a lot of them told me that even though weather and climate is a part of the curriculum, there's not really a lot of resources out there. So, in analyzing it, I said, let's go out there and let's go create it and let's make it fun. I think when you and I we were growing up, you remember Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Yeah.
You know, think about how many people he inspired, with science. That is what I'm hoping to be for weather and climate.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And so let's talk about because you went through extremes in your reporting career. I mean, and that's a reporter's like that's hard hitting, holding the powerful accountable, and now you're doing meteorology, which, people associate more positive. But when you're in a market where weather could potentially kill people, people rely on you the most than the anchor themselves. um, so how are you able to navigate I guess that tone, a transition from being a hard-hitting investigative reporter to being a morning meteorologist?
So a lot of the soft skills are the same. When you are an investigative reporter, you are taking complex topics and you're breaking them down and you're discussing why they matter to the person. We are doing the same thing as scientists. We are taking very complex scientific information and we're making sure that the viewer understands exactly what's happening. And so for me, the only real difference was instead of pulling together a quote unquote package, every day or every 2 days or every 3 days, now it's a daily basis that I'm doing this. Now I always have to figure out, what really is the next story? What really is the next thing? With both, I'm using data, right? I think meteorologists are the best data storytellers. And if you really think about, who are the most efficient, effective meteorologists, they're the people who are really good storytellers. Yes, they're good scientists, but they're really good storytellers. And you always have to figure out who your audience is, what you want them to walk away with, and how we're going to tell that story. And to me, it's and I know people may say, "Ah, no, it's different." There are so many skills that lend themselves. Now, granted, yes, I mean, instead of submitting FOIAs and submitting interview requests, now I'm actually speaking with the National Weather Service, and I'm really thinking about it from a more macro perspective about what's happening and what's applicable. So, yes, there are some differences, but when you really break everything down, to its core, we're just communicators. And the only thing I'm doing is I'm just changing what it is that I'm communicating about.
Okay. And then for people, because being a reporter, some people may want to transition to becoming a meteorologist. What advice do you have for them? Because, when I was coming up, I wanted to be the Al Roker of the 21st century. Like I put that in my college bio when our professor said, "What do you want to do in your career?" Because I always admired him. And, I started as a news producer. I couldn't start at, meteorology right off the gate. So I started as a news producer. And then when I had time off after my newscast on the weekends, I went on the green screen or the weather wall, or I made sure to become best friends with the meteorologist at every station I went to. Because, that's a career that I aspired to be. And, when I was moving from market to market, news directors liked my weather experience because producers sometimes don't know how to play up weather very well in their
Mhm.
newscasts. That's what they tell me. And so when I was at NBC Connecticut, that's when I really, got into the driver's seat because then they added a weather producing title to my news producing title there. And I was kind of surprised because it happened out of nowhere. Because I guess they were impressed of the weather coverage that I did on the news side. And just adding that context. But for a reporter or a producer, someone that's working behind the scenes, how could I make that jump to become a meteorologist?
Well, first, it's all about the experience. I really think you have to ask yourself, why do you want to make the transition, right? Is it, because I'm sick and tired of the grind and I want to stay on television? Is it because I really love the science? Is it because I really love storytelling about specifically weather? And the reason why I say that is because you're going to have to pull together some stories, a reel that showcases that you can either speak about weather or that you're in front of the wall. The second thing is you don't know what you don't know, right? So you got to go back to school. And I went to Mississippi State. They have a 3-year program.
Me too.
Overall a really good program.
Yes.
And I was in my early 30s when I saw everybody having kids and buying homes. I was like, we're not doing this in 3 years. We're doing this in two. In hindsight, I probably should have taken the full 3 years because it was a little stressful to do it, but it's an excellent program where you can design the hours so that it at least can fit your schedule. I know some people that did it in 4 years. I would not recommend it. I truly think 3 years is really the appropriate thing. And then the last thing I would say is network. We are only as strong as our network, the people that we know. I can tell you right now, there are a number of recruiters, news directors, they're always looking for meteorologists. I think while in some cases, the easiest job in the newsroom, I think it's also the most difficult. part of the newsroom just because it's very hard to find scientists who communicate publicly very well. We understand the science. We're very good at being able to say, if X is happening, then Y is going to happen. But being able to do that in a way where the average person who has no science background can understand it and also make it either entertaining or educational, it's a very hard skill.
Yes, it is. And let's talk about networking because networking is very important. And you were, the president of the NABJ Weather Task Force a few years ago. And so tell to our viewers how it's important to network, especially in the meteorology field, to get where you want to get to where you are today.
Yeah, the meteorologist field is very small. I feel like either we know one another or we know somebody that knows that person. I know the old adage is what, 6 degrees of separation. I think in meteorology it's two. And I'm
Yes.
not exaggerating. But when we had looked at NABJ, which is the National Association of Black Journalists, I saw a void that there was a place for journalists, there was a place for people in entertainment and sports, but when it came to weather, the environment, the stories that honestly drive local news, there wasn't really a
Mm-hmm.
place for us. And so I started having some conversations with some other meteorologists around, hey, can we do this? Why, hasn't this happened before? It turns out they had tried before, it just wasn't really successful. And then, fortunately, I had the ear of Dorothy Tucker, who was the president at the time. And, I kind of said to Dorothy, I was like, hey, we need a space. And guess what? I even have some potential sponsors who might even be interested in at least helping us get off the ground here. I can tell you that with the help of some other meteorologists, we became the second grossing group within the National Association of Black Journalists. Why is that? Because we all had different connections with different groups outside of the organization that saw what we were doing and said, we would love to write a check and financially support folks. I my rule of thumb is this: with networking, the best thing for you to do is read one, you need to reach out to people, right? I always say, look,
Mm-hmm.
once a quarter, once, maybe twice a year, send somebody an email, send somebody a LinkedIn message. Okay. It's not that hard. I think what happens is life happens, right? We get very caught up in the day to day and we just forget to follow up with people. And I have found the overwhelming majority of people, if you text them, you email them, you're going to get a response at some point. It may not be right away, but at some point, even when you follow up again, especially that second time, it's like, oh, whoops, okay, wait, let me
Mm-hmm.
respond to that person. And so a lot of the jobs that I have gotten over the course of my career was because I met other people at times that I was not looking for a job who said, hey, either this is the person you need to talk to, or hey, I know this job that's coming up. Would you be interested in that? What do they say? Like something like 75% of jobs aren't even posted. And then by the time that they're posted, they already actually have the
Filled.
candidate. And so when you think about that, it is imperative that you're constantly networking and meeting people. I've set a goal, especially as an entrepreneur, that once a week I'm going to networking events, right? Some of them are more beneficial than others, but you have to constantly be introducing new people in your life. And not that I'm saying that you should be using people as an ATM, right? It's like, oh, what you can do for me. But sometimes, even when they're networking, sometimes helping others a year, 2 years down the road, that lends itself to dividends where people will then say, hey, did you know about this thing? Yeah, I know that you helped me a year ago. Totally
Mm-hmm.
forgot. Hey, let me help you out with this if you're interested. That has happened to me countless times where I've helped people, didn't even expect some help back, and like years later they were like, oh yeah, I remember you helped me get that job, or oh yeah, you helped me, this particular situation, what can I do?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And that, the mentors are very important. I always say, The internship that changed my life was my doing my meteorology internship at NBC 10 Philadelphia. As you probably know, I met Anzio there,
Hmm.
Johnny Green there. Oh gosh, a lot of people. Brittany, who's the meteorologist currently there at NBC Philadelphia as well. Just so many people that have mentored me and got me to where I am today. So yes, that networking is very important. And also, I'm kind of surprised that NMBJ didn't have a weather task force sooner because the most famous meteorologist in the world is a black person.
I mean, Keith, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. Here, I mean, it took a little arm twisting, because there were some people within the organization that said, "Well, the name is journalist," and I said, "Yeah, but the best journalists." I mean, I hate to say it, but are meteorologists, right? I mean, what really is the difference? We're communicating facts. We're communicating the news. The only difference is we're focused on science and data in weather and climate. That's the only difference. And I think when we explained it like that, I think that there were a lot more people who said, "All right, no, we do need a space. We do need to include some folks,"
Yes, and it's still going strong. So thank
which
you.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
hear.
Yes, yes. I'm very happy that it's staying strong and it's important. It's important. I mean, recovering especially since I live in California, we had a climate disaster. Well, a fire disaster. But there's some climate lessons that can be parsed from that horrific firestorm that happened earlier in January.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's very important. So, also, I wanted to ask about this because you went to network. And so, what was that like for people who are thinking, I may want to be a network meteorologist or just work for a network? What is that like?
Yeah. So look, all of the basic skills are the same, right? In that you got to know your stuff, right? And I think very quickly people are going to realize whether or not you know what causes a tornado, or if you know what the differences are between a tornado watch versus a tornado warning, right? I think the biggest change, between local and national is the amount of people that you have, right? Instead of you as a meteorologist doing it by yourself, that particular task, there is one person whose sole task it is to do X. So, for example, I think for a lot of local meteorologists, to me, what you got to do digital, right? You got to do on air. You also have to write up an email. You also have to produce your own graphics. Those are all four separate jobs at the network level. When you think about the amount of people that are involved in that product, that's also the reason why the product is overall tends to be a bit more elevated, because there's a lot more ideas, a lot more people that are trying to make it successful. What I will say is the same basic lessons, still apply at the network level,
Mm.
which is, you're going to have, your teams, you work very well together, your teams where you're like, all right, I got to work with this person. All right. You're still going to have your office dynamics, your office politics, right? You're still going to have, your particular things where, audience members may or may not like you. So they may be critical of you. You're going to still have to navigate that as well. So a lot of the things that we do at the local level, we still do at the national level. I think the only difference is instead of focusing on one, let's say, mile or 2 mile area, we're now focused around the country, which does have positives and negatives, right? You're constantly trying to figure out who should have priority in terms of coverage. Does somebody in Omaha really care about, a temperature inversion in New York City? Does someone in New York City care about a tornado in Nebraska? How do we make it appealing so that no matter where you are, the weather story is just very interesting? That is, I think, the biggest challenge at the national level. That at the local level, you don't have to worry about that, because the reason why people are turning into you is because they likely either live in that area, or they're traveling to that area, or they have family in that area. So there's already a vested interest in what it is you're going to say.
Gotcha. And then so we got just a few more questions and we're gonna wrap this up. So because this is a question I bet you get asked a lot. How do you make money as an entrepreneur? That because people wanna take that transition, leave news, but they're concerned about how am I gonna make money?
Yeah. So
Expect to take a pay cut?
Yeah, look, to whom much is given, much is required, right? That's what the good book says. And as a entrepreneur, I had a very good support network. My wife is extremely supportive of what I do. I will tell you, as an entrepreneur, it's probably going to take 1 to 2 years to make this thing work. And a lot of people don't really want to believe that, right? I mean, we're part of the microwave generation, right? You put in, the microwave something 20 seconds on high, you want it to be singing, right? You want it to be hot.
Mhm.
I can tell you, for a lot of entrepreneurs, that just doesn't happen. It takes a year. Part of the reason why it takes so long is, one, just because you have a great idea doesn't mean that the marketplace will think that it's a great idea. Part of what you're going to go through, at least for the first 3 to 6 months, is educating people on what your product is and why they even need your product. And then you're also going to have to go through this weird little back and forth about figuring out what your price point is, right? If something costs you $5 to produce, obviously you can't sell it for $5, right? You're going to need to sell it for 10 so that you can at least pay yourself a little bit of money, and also to cover the cost of everything else and
Mhm.
marketing. And so that's one thing that's going to happen. Two is, I think, as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to pivot several times. Initially, when we started, we were an education tech firm. We were an ed tech firm. So we were designing the first weather app for junior high school and high school kids. We had some governors around the country who basically were trying to take cell phones out of classrooms, killed their business overnight. And so we had to pivot. We had to say, all right, well, what else is working? Where else is there a need? And how can we become the go to person for that? And so I think everybody is looking for home runs, and sometimes you just need a single, you just need a double. It's going to be a small brush fire initially, but even small brush fires eventually become wildfires, right? And so what you have to do is you also got to be patient as well. So a couple of things here, Keith. One is you got to create the product. Two, you got to go out, you got to verify it, right? The marketplace is going to tell you that it's terrible, or have you ever thought about this? Three, you got to be open to a lot of feedback, a lot of criticism. Some of it's going to be good. Some of it is just going to be bad, and you're going to have to be dismissive. The other part of this is you're going to have to do your research on pricing. That was one of my biggest struggles when I came up with the new concept that we have with Drizzle Weather, was how do I make sure that the price that we're charging is middle of the road, right? We don't want something that's premium, but I also don't want something that people are going to be like, oh, why is it so cheap? I don't want it, right? But
Mhm.
that's because that was the audience that I was trying to appeal to. If you want to do something that's luxury or premium, that's fine. Just know that you're probably going to have less customers initially. If you do something on the lower end of the price point, totally fine too, right? McDonald's does that, and they're $1 billion business, right? But I don't go to McDonald's for an exceptional burger. I really go to it because it's convenient, and they make money based on volume, not necessarily on the quality of the product. So I think that you have to analyze all of that. And I kind of alluded to this before. You just got to stay patient and talk to other entrepreneurs. It's going to happen. It took, I think, Colonel Sanders, if I remember correctly, I think it took him like 5 years or 7 years, something like that, to even make, money doing this. He was traveling around to different restaurants, and, he kept saying, hey, I have the best chicken. And, he would exchange chicken recipes with people. So this is a long haul thing. What, Uber wasn't profitable for the first, I believe, what was it, 10 years, 12 years? So yeah, this is not for the faint at heart. But when you start to see them checks rolling in, and you're like, wait, this is cool. We just made some money. That's when it starts becoming inspiring, or people start saying, hey, I believe in your business. Like, let me at least help you connect to some other folks. But patience is key. Like I said, it's going to take 1 to 2 years. I know for some people that's not realistic financially.
Mhm.
So, the other piece of advice I would have is, wherever you currently are, try and figure out a way to do it and test it where you're at while you're still getting that full-time check. Because once you start doing this full time, it's sink or swim, my friend. Sink or swim.
Okay, love that advice. And so to wrap this up, I always ask everyone this question. So what is Jason Frazier keeping up
I'm keeping up on a lot of things. One is music. So, part of even though technically it's a job, but it's really a fun job. In addition to this company, I DJ. So I'm constantly having to keep up with the latest and greatest music. The other thing that I'm keeping up with is travel. I still believe, in quarterly trips because I believe in the mind's ability to take a break, to change stuff because you start viewing things differently and you start thinking about things that you're like, oh wow, like that's really interesting. And then of course, the last thing, because I'm now in education, I'm keeping up a lot more with the political landscape. How are things changing and how it's going to impact my business? And I think as entrepreneurs, as people who are thinking about this, I think before, when I was an employee, I was not really keeping up as much with the political landscape. I was interested because I studied political science, but now I'm much more aware of different pieces of legislation that are being passed and how that's impacting my customers. And do I now need to change something in order to align to it? It is a growth opportunity, because there are certain people now that I'm like, oh, I need to follow this person. I need to make sure that, whatever this person says, I know that there's probably going to be 10 or 12 people who are going to follow that. Okay, well, how do we make sure that we're in line with that, this year, next year, the year that comes? So it's a lot, but I'm having fun.
Cool, cool. And actually, I have a question about the DJing thing. What is the most overplayed song, and what's the most underrated song?
Oh, the most overplayed song is YMCA. As a DJ, I'm like, all right, I guess we gotta play it. All right, let's play it. But I get it. It's what I call the crowd unifier.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor. It doesn't matter if you're old or young. Everybody's familiar with that song. The most underplayed song. Ooh, that one's got to be. Oh, that one's a little tough for me because it really depends on the genre. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, Keith.
Okay, okay. Oh, what's new in your rotation? You got some Olivia Dean in your rotation yet?
Yes, we do. Uh, so we have that. Also, periodically, I still get requests for a lot of old school music. It's not new school music. A lot of it, there's a huge push now for 90s and 2000s hip hop, 90s and 2000s pop, top 40. Not that I'm saying that the current stuff may not be great, right? I mean, obviously, everybody loves Bruno Mars, and that other song APT. People
Mm-hmm.
love HOTTOGO, right? People
You chop
love those
around.
songs, but the songs I really get the top request for, it's interesting to me. It's like from 90, I'll say, to right around 2010, and that's just across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in your 20s, if you're in your 30s, 40s, even 50s. People, that seems to be the golden age of music.
Okay, got it. I had to ask 'cause I had a lot of friends getting married, and I was like, what song should they play or what song should they not play at their wedding? So, okay, cool. And so, Jason, where could my followers follow you at?
So, Drizzle Weather, we are on all platforms: Facebook, Instagram, as well as TikTok and YouTube. We're not on Twitter. Yeah, we're not on Twitter. You can always go to our website, drizzleweather.com. That's really the best way to stay in touch and see everything that's happening, that's going on. We got some new products we're working on. We got a new book we're also working on as well, but we just came out with edible weather as well. So, shameless plug, go on Amazon, go on Barnes and Nobles, check it out. It's only 15.99. So, come on. It's two Starbucks lattes. You can afford it.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And remember, you guys can follow me at Keep Up with Keith on my TikTok and on my Instagram. So again, it's at Keep Up with Keith. So Jason, thank you for joining us today, and everyone have a good day. Okay, I'm just gonna stop.